Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm at 2 p.m., so we will get this webinar up and running. My name is Ed Seaman, and I come from Stenic, who are the Road Safety Trust Communications and Media Partners. Thank you very much for joining us for this webinar, the purpose of which is to help you if you're considering applying for funding through the upcoming autumn round. We will provide a brief introduction as to the work of the Trust and cover things like eligibility for funding, as well as providing some guidance on how to prepare an application. Before we sort of get underway properly, I'm just going to run you through how the session is going to work. First of all, we will have a presentation from Tanya Kadir and Lindsay Eckley, two of the Trust grants officers. This will last for about 20 minutes. And then we'll be joined by Louise Palomino to dive into a quick question and answer session to answer any questions you may have about the upcoming round. To do so, we would kindly ask if you use the Q&A function, please, not the chat function, which can be found at the bottom of the screen. And lastly, the webinar is being recorded, so if there's anything you want to catch up on, you'll be able to do so in your leisure. We will distribute the link after the webinar has finished. Anyway, I think that's about enough for me from now. So to start you off, I'll hand over to Tanya and Lindsay for their presentation.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Kadir, one of the grant officers at the Road Safety Trust. I'm going to take a few minutes now to introduce you to the work of the Trust. The Road Safety Trust is a registered charity and was set up in 2014. Our vision is for the UK to have zero road deaths and serious injuries. The way we contribute to this vision is by funding and promoting projects to make the UK roads safer. This includes practical measures, research, dissemination, and education. So far, since our inception, we've awarded over 6.8 million in grants to 85 projects, and we're really pleased to be the largest independent funder of road safety research and initiatives in the UK. Next slide, please, Ed. The Road Safety Trust has provided grant funding since 2015, and in 2019, we established our small grants program and themed grant program. We currently run 2 rounds a year, small grants in the spring and large grants in the autumn. Small grants were developed in response to the road safety sector's need for local project funding. These grants are particularly well suited to practical pilot projects and generally not restricted to a particular theme. We also offer a grants program more suited to research-oriented or bigger pilot projects, or often the rollout of successful interventions. These are typically larger grants, and for the last few years, these have been themed. This year, we're doing something different. Both funding rounds are going to be open. With no theme, the project can be on any road safety topic. And in addition, for this round, we're trialing a new approach, offering applicants the opportunity to apply for either small or large grants. Next slide, please, Ed. All our grant programs have 4 common objectives. These are: generate new knowledge about what works to save lives and prevent injury, translate ideas into new measures, influence road safety policy and practice, and finally, support partnership working and collaboration. Over the whole portfolio of projects, we expect to fund a range which in combination covers all these purposes. However, your project may focus on one or more than one of these first 3 objectives. All projects, however, do need to demonstrate a degree of partnership working or collaboration. Next slide, please. There are 2 routes to funding in this round, depending on the amount that you're applying for. A small grant strand for requests between 20,000 and 50,000, and a large grant strand for requests over 50,000, but less than 500,000. However, if you're applying for over 300,000, please contact the grants team to discuss your project before applying. We cannot accept application for grants over 300,000 who have not done this. As a reminder, the strands in this round are both open and can be on any road safety topic, which meets our criteria and supports the objectives of the grant program. Next slide, please. Really key to our small grants funding is making a difference to road safety in a very practical way. This strand is particularly suitable for local projects, which can then share their learning and make resulting tools or interventions available to other practitioners across the country. The focus is on trialing, piloting, and evaluating ways of improving road safety. And we've been really pleased with the interest in this funding stream and that we can help meet the need for funding for smaller, practical, and innovative road safety projects. This is why we're giving applicants another opportunity to apply for small grants in our autumn round this year. This grants program supports our strategic priority, Pilots That Test. Applications to our small grants can be between 20,000 and 50,000 in total and over a maximum project length of up to 2 years. Next slide, please. We also have funding available for large grants. This funding is for research and the development of innovative practical interventions. Eligible projects include research, pilots and trials, improving, developing, and expanding successful trials and interventions, and the evaluation of projects and interventions. This grants program supports our strategic priorities, research that informs, and pilots that test. All projects, including research projects, need to have a practical focus, and all applicants must include plans for monitoring and evaluation of effectiveness. Applications for the large grants program can be between 50,000 and 500,000 in total and over a maximum project length of up to 3 years. But please, it's important that any requests looking for funding over 300,000 speak to us before applying. Next slide, please. So who can apply? To apply, you need to be based in the UK. Local public sector organizations, charities, community interest companies, and universities are all eligible. And further details about who is eligible are given in the guidance. Next slide, please. This next slide illustrates visually the variety of organizations that have received grants from the Road Safety Trust, from local authorities to universities to community and charitable organizations. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Lindsay, who will take you through some advice and criteria for the application process and how you can apply successfully in this round. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Hi, I'm Lindsay, one of the grants officers at the Road Safety Trust. All of the grants information that we are summarising in the webinar today is on our website, and we highly recommend you read the application guidance for this round, which covers more information than what we can do today. It also includes a definitions sheet for key terms and what we mean by innovative. There is an application workbook for each strand to help applicants develop their bid with partners. This also contains examples of how to set out aims and objectives, your outputs and outcomes, and there's a template for you to work through on your own. For large grants, there's also a budget template for setting out your budget. Next slide, please. Going on to your application and what you should concentrate on, it is essential that you clearly set out your project aims and achievable road safety objectives and how the project will improve road safety. Aims and objectives are key criteria during assessment, so we recommend you paying close attention to these and check how we define these terms using the application workbook. As Tanya said, partnership working and collaboration is another key requirement, and we expect to see some degree of this in all bids. The more you can tell us about the role and contribution of partners, the better. Grant funding is an opportunity to try new things and understand if and how they work for road safety. So demonstrating how your project makes a difference and explaining how you will measure success is a vital part of your bid. Linked to this, evidence and learning for road safety sector is important. Even if it's a local project, it should develop or provide something useful for wider interest or applicability, and this should be clearly articulated in your bid. In response to feedback and through analysing reasons why bids are not successful, we have redesigned and hopefully simplified the application form for this year for both strands. However, please note that the large grants application has more sections and must provide greater detail we expect about the level of funding for this strand. Next slide, please. Going on to the eligible costs, this is an important part of your bid, and we ask for a budget as part of your application. Please make sure that this includes a good amount of details such as rates and number of days for staff time costs. We don't fund 100% of costs, so you'll need to find other sources of funding. This can be from you as the applicant or from a partner on the project, and can also include in-kind contributions. The other thing to stress is that our grant funding is for project costs only, and not what we refer to as core costs, which are the general organisational running costs. Sometimes we do receive applications which look like they could be costs to underpin an organisation's main activities, rather than funding for a specific project, and this is not eligible. We only fund direct project costs for public bodies and universities, so we don't contribute towards those additional overheads, such as estate costs or central management costs that are not directly involved in managing the particular project you're applying for. But in some cases, for example, for registered charities, we may be able to pay a proportion of these. Please refer to our guidance for further details around eligible and ineligible costs. Because the emphasis of our grant funding is for evidence-based road safety and influencing practice and policy, we do not fund standard operational equipment or signage or police officer salaries and overtime. Costs for evaluation are eligible, however, and there is an offer from us to provide funding for evaluation support, including up to 2 days training for staff, and you can apply for these costs as part of your application. So please do consider whether funding for training and evaluation would be useful for you. This training could not only support the project you're working on, but also some capacity building for road safety evaluation in your organisation. In our guidance, there is also a list of organisations who can help with evaluation should you wish to apply for funding for this and for training in support of your application. Next slide, please. As mentioned earlier, our goal is for grant funding to facilitate the generation and use of evidence of what works or doesn't work in road safety. In this spirit, we ask all bids to list the outputs that will be produced and outline plans for how you will share these. All projects should share the results with relevant audiences and make available to others any interventions, tools, or resources produced during the project. Remember that it is sometimes just as important to know what is not effective. If something doesn't work, don't hide it. Others need to know what to not put in place just as much as what they should. At the very least, all our grant recipients are required to produce a final project report that can be shared publicly on our website. We have a partnership with Road Safety GB, who host all project reports on a dedicated section of the Knowledge Centre. And many of our projects have taken up the opportunity of presenting at RSGB conferences, and so this would be a good thing to include in your bid. So to support this, we have developed a knowledge sharing toolkit that grant recipients will be asked to complete to plan dissemination and communication. Along with this, we have some resources to help with ways to share outputs and outcomes, and this will be available on a grantee section, which will be coming to our website shortly. Next slide, please. So where can you find further support with your application? Well, as I said, the first place to look is our website, where you'll find all the information about the current round details and the reference documents. We do encourage you to read the guidance for the round as it is updated each year, and ensure you read through the grant criteria to make sure the project is a really good fit for us. After the positive feedback we received on the one-to-ones we offered previously, we are holding these 20-minute appointments again. A member of the grants team will be available to answer your questions you have about your idea, the criteria, or any of the application process. Most of the times available have now been booked, but there might be a couple of spots left. So go onto the website where you'll find the button to book onto a one-to-one. If after watching this webinar, you've already booked a one-to-one and you decide that it's not for you, or we've already answered your questions throughout this webinar, please do cancel it, as the spots can be then available for someone else to take. Our general email can be used to ask specific questions, but bear in mind that it might take a little time to respond because we are a small team and we all work part-time. Next slide, please. So by now, I hope you're all eager to submit applications to the autumn round. Even though we provide application questions by the way of workbooks, please remember we can only receive applications via the online portal. The link to the portal will be made available on our website when the round opens on Wednesday, the 4th of October. On the portal, if this is your first application to the Road Safety Trust, you'll need to register and set up an account. If you already have an account, you'll be asked to log in. You will first be asked to complete a short eligibility quiz designed to save you time in applying if your project is not eligible, and from this you will be automatically directed to the correct strand for the correct application form for the strand, depending on which you're requesting. The window for applications will close on the 7th of November at 5 p.m. and we hope to make decisions by January 2024 for small grants and by February for large grants, although this does depend on how many submissions we receive. Next slide, please. That brings us to the end of the webinar. Thank you for watching. We hope it's been useful. We do have plenty of time for questions that you may have, which Louise will be able to answer through the Q&A session. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Lindsay and Tanya. I noticed we've had a few people join throughout that presentation. So just to reiterate, this session is being recorded. So if there's anything you missed, the recording will be available on the website in due course to catch up. Right, we have had quite a few questions come in already, so I'm going to pick up a few of these. I'm going to pick up the first one, which is, are there any restrictions to submitting multiple grant applications?
Yeah, hello everyone. That's a really good question and one that we do get asked from time to time. And you can apply for more than one grant at any one time, and you can apply for a grant if you're currently in receipt of another one. But obviously we do look at things like an organisation's capacity and individuals concerned, their time to manage more than one project.
Excellent. And more questions now starting to flood in, which is great. I'm going to pick up another one, which is, can SMB companies apply for a large grant with local authorities as a partner, or does the local authority have to be the lead?
So it is more often the case that the local authority would be the lead with a small, medium-sized business as a partner. There's no hard and fast rule as to why it couldn't be the other way round. But we haven't tended to fund many businesses, as such as the main grant recipient. But it's not a no. It might be one where it's worth emailing into us if you haven't already.
Excellent. Let's take a next question, shall we? What are the stages of payments over 2 to 3 year projects for large grant funding?
Yes, so we're flexible around payments. What we do is, when a grant is awarded, we have a discussion with the grantee around when the key milestones are in the project, and so therefore what would be good reporting dates, and we build a sort of bespoke payment plan around that. So it depends. It's done on a project by project basis. It tends to be 9 times out of 10 it's payment in arrears. But for example, for registered charities, we can be more flexible about that. In some instances, pay in advance.
Excellent. Let's take another question, shall we? Can a local authority work with companies outside the UK as a partner, or is it only UK companies allowed?
I've never been asked that before. I don't think I've come across it before either. So, and I don't like to just say no on the spot, even though that might be, might be leaning towards a no in an answer. But to be fair, again, I'd say probably email in about that one.
Okay, awesome. We've got a similar question about, can organisations such as the Road Safety Partnership be involved in more than one bid? I think the answer to that question was yes. So we'll pick up the next question was, what time will the portal be open on the 4th of October? Very specific.
I think we set it up for 5. No, it should be set up for 9 a.m. Just to open, and then it closes on the 7th of November in the evening. after sort of the end of the working day.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Tom.
It's always good to see people eager to apply straight away. Will applications that include an intervention be viewed more favourably?
The short answer, I think, is probably yes. So all projects should show how they lead to impact, and so if an intervention is sort of part and parcel of what you're coming to us for, that would already make it quite a strong bid. But generally there's a mix of projects at different stages of their journeys. But at least a route to practical implementation should be there and should be clear.
Excellent. We've got a few more questions from the same attendees, so I'll just pick those up and go back to a couple more shortly. The next question is, what additional documents would be beneficial for the application?
All of that is set out on the portal, and in the guidance. As you work through that, it makes it very clear what additional documents need to be supplied and uploaded as you go along. So it's things like a budget, project management information, and then a bit more information for the larger grants.
And I think we should probably also point out on both the large grants and the small grants website, we've developed a editable workbook that you can use to help you fill out all the application questions. The application still has to be submitted online, but you can collaborate as a team. And that also indicates where you might be asked for additional information that you can submit as a separate attachment.
Excellent. Okay, we've got a couple of questions on the same theme here, so I'm going to tie these ones together. You mentioned that requests for 100% project costs will not be eligible. How much should the applicant organisation be able to match?
We don't have any rules around that. We sort of look at the project in the round, and we understand that different organisations are in different situations in terms of what funding they can access. So yeah, we're flexible on that one. Just require some kind of funding from other sources.
And it can be in kind or cash contribution, so keep that in mind as well.
And it can be in kind from the applicant themselves. So if it was a local authority, for example, it can be officer time.
Yeah, and on the subject of in kind, another question reads, does the organisation's overhead and indirect costs count as in kind contributions?
Yes, it can as well. Yes, that's a really good point to make.
Another question here is, many of the slots for the grants team are already taken. Will you add more if required? Are these obviously the one-to-one sessions, I assume?
We have been considering that, and it's possible that we may release a few more slots. Yes, and some are still available, and some may become available after this webinar. So keep an eye on the website.
Excellent, thank you. Another question says, you mentioned in the guidelines that registered charity overheads can be partly covered. Does this apply if a university is also a registered charity? If so, what overhead costs should be submitted to be covered?
It wouldn't apply to universities that are also registered charities. I'm afraid, no. It's as I understand it, more usually universities aren't. There may be some that are registered charities as well. But it's a standard approach around overheads for universities, I'm afraid.
Okay, next question. They're still flooding in, which is great to see. Can bids include small-scale engineering works, brackets pilot, with evaluation following to see effectiveness?
I wonder if that question means the evaluation would be a further project, or what we'd like to see is it, to an extent, be part of the same project. So some of the evaluation be part of the application that's being applied for. And then perhaps a further project could look at the evaluation in more detail. but an engineering project with an element of evaluation in it would be, a good candidate.
Excellent. And so I guess it's just quick time to mention that obviously our panelists are doing a great job answering your questions, but as they mentioned, you can contact info@roadsafetytrust.org.uk if you've got any other questions or feel like you need your question answering sort of further. Okay, let's pick up another question, shall we? How can we quantify and present certain in-kind contributions, such as assistance with participant recruitment, etc., etc.?
We supply a standard template for the budget, and then when you apply on the portal, there is space for a narrative as well to add information if you'd like to. If the budget doesn't provide a complete picture, also an explanation and some further information can be very, very helpful there.
Excellent. Another question here. Once an award is made, how long is it before the project starts? Also, is there a no later than date?
The project should start as and when it's ready. So we don't have particular requirements around that. We prefer that they start quite promptly, not before the award date, for example, but as soon after that this is practicable. It does take a little bit of time, sometimes sorting out perhaps additional terms and conditions, getting paperwork signed. One way, if you're looking at having quite a prompt start, would be to have a look at some of the documentation that's provided with a grant award, and thinking about how you'd get that ready. That might save a bit of time. And in some cases there can be a delay, just because we're making decisions early in the new year. It doesn't mean that a project would need to start then. If it was planned to start in the summer, for example, that would probably still be okay.
Excellent. Let's move on to the next question. We're getting through them. For large grants, what is the expected scope of work? For example, can it include secondary analysis of data or primary research or development of a campaign, validation of existing campaign, or so on?
Yes, all of those things, and I mean that is probably the type of detail that we'd get into on a one-to-one, if the person asking that question has managed to book one.
Excellent. So the next question is with regards to collaborations. Does it have to involve university and industry, or can it be two universities collaborating?
Can be two universities collaborating, but then the issue to think about there is the impact, whether you need partners sort of on the ground, as it were, as well, or perhaps not formal partners, but some way that you're collaborating with whoever's going to make use of the research. There's something to think about there.
Excellent. Next question reads, are there any review stages during a large grant 3-year project?
Yes, so this is the work that we do sort of post-award. We look at reporting dates and key milestones and work them out in conjunction with the grantee. So yes, there would be the review dates.
Awesome. I'm going to take the next question, which is, the supplementary documents referred to in the workbook for large grants mentions literature, regulations, and CVs. Is there a page limit or page number suggestion for these supplementary documents?
We haven't really set a page limit. I would, particularly when you're including CVs, sometimes it can become quite a large document, but I would suggest for the other two pieces, maybe aim for 2 sides each, not more than that.
Awesome.
That might be something we, that's a good point that we can take into account for next time.
Yeah.
We probably should have set a page limit. Would have been helpful. Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the next question, shall we? Do you require small grants to be evaluated? This poster says they're concerned RE costs.
To an extent, there should be some form of evaluation, or to put it another way, looking at measures of success. So certainly you should have measures of success in there, and you should be able to evaluate and reflect on whether you've met your project's objectives. But it doesn't necessarily mean a full sort of formal evaluation, if you like, of what you've developed. What we hope is, using the workbook and the aims and objective template, that you can work through that and see the types of things that we're looking for.
Excellent. Let's take another question. Does the Road Safety Trust have a collaboration portal where we can discuss ideas with local authorities and companies can share their ideas or partnerships for a joint bid?
We don't have such a portal. We are looking to run events in future where we can bring people together like that, to talk about ideas and collaborate and build capacity as well to deliver projects. But it's not something that we currently have formally, although we can signpost to networks of academics and researchers, in particular through a network called ARPAN. Again, details of which are in the guidance.
Very good question.
I just check with Tanya and Lindsay if I've covered that. If you want to add anything on that point, or that covers it.
You've covered it, yeah.
Excellent. We've just got a few more questions now. So if you've got anything you'd still like to add, please feel free to put it in the Q&A function at the bottom. But we'll take the next one, which is, can equipment be contributed as an in-kind expense?
Yes, I think so. Yes. Sorry, it took me a while to think through that. I don't see why not. And again, Tanya, Lindsay, do you have?
Yeah, I think we've had some projects where they have done that. So that's not a problem.
Excellent. Next question reads, when will the large grant application forms be available on the website?
They should be going up any time. So the one that's up there for the small grants right now will also be updated. That's from the last round, and we made some small modifications. The gist of it is the same, but there's a few changes. And the new versions should be going up probably by tomorrow. I suspect they should be up there.
Excellent. And then another sort of similar thing is, can you confirm when the video of this webinar will be made available online?
Early next week, I suspect.
Yes, I expect.
You, Ed.
Yes, I might actually take this one on myself. Yes, obviously we just need to clip it together after the webinar has taken place, and hopefully we should have it online by the end of this week, if not the start of next week for you. Okay, so we've got another question which relates, I think it's a follow-up from a question we had earlier. So just to clarify, in-kind is only acceptable as match without direct cash contribution.
It can be. You can include cash contributions as match funding. You can include both in-kind and cash contributions as match funding.
Okay, great. We've got a few more to go at the moment.
And also, just to add, you can have more than one funder contributing. So often we have projects where maybe a local authority has an in-kind contribution, and then there's an additional funder alongside ourselves that is making an additional cash contribution.
Excellent. Anyone else have anything they'd like to add on that one, or should I hop to the next question? Okay, the next question reads, would the Road Safety Trust fund projects that are innovative, if I can speak, innovative to the local authority, e.g. a different approach to 20-mile-an-hour zones, or does it need to be universally I can't say that word, can I? Innovative.
So it absolutely can be local authority innovative, and we've had some really nice projects from local authorities along those lines.
Excellent. In the case of funding, how flexible are we in terms of post-award changes within the budget?
Yeah.
Shall I answer this?
Yeah. Go ahead.
We deal with all of those on very much a case-by-case basis. More often than not, we are quite flexible, but we need to understand that what impact it might have on the overall budget and the timeline. So within the different budget lines, there's a lot of flexibility, but you need to come to us and we have a discussion to understand why and what might be changing for the project as a result of that.
Excellent. I hope that answers the question. We'll take the next one on, which is on projects that involve a high degree of complexity or are highly novel, will it be acceptable to budget in a degree of contingency that can be then returned to the trust at the end of the project if some or all is unused?
We haven't actually worked this way. Yeah, we haven't worked that way to date. I realised that with running a larger program for the first time, going up to 500k, that might be something to think about. So I think it's probably best to stick with the template as it currently is, and then we do understand that costs may change, and we can deal with that if an award is made and throughout managing the grant.
Excellent. The next question we will take says, has the trust considered funding post-crash response initiatives? I realise this is out of scope with regards to prevention, but just curious if this angle has come up before in your discussions with applicants.
Actually, we can fund post-crash interventions. So yes, they are eligible as well, and we welcome applications along those lines.
Yes, excellent. And I've got a couple of similar questions here, so I'm just going to put them together. Is there a limit for the total amount or number of projects available for funding?
Not in theory, but I'll go back to what I said earlier, where we assess the overall capacity of an organisation and a team or an individual to manage the awards and the amounts and the work involved.
Excellent. And we've got one more question on here, which says, is it possible to cover the costs of a PhD? Yeah, I guess, is it possible to cover the cost of the PhD? I'm not quite sure what the rest of the question means, but I guess that's where we'll go for. Is it possible to cover the costs of a PhD?
The stipend, the PhD stipend costs. That is, we don't usually cover stipend costs for PhDs just because of the way PhDs work. They don't fit in within the time limits of our grant funding, which is up to 3 years. And PhDs are liable for changes in time and scope as well on the project. So first part of the PhD is to build that scope, which isn't always known at the time of application to a grant funding. So you have to think very carefully about that if you want to apply to support PhDs.
So it's not a definite no, but it can be difficult.
Excellent. Thank you, Lindsay, for your help with that one. What is meant by the RST with the term post-crash interventions? I think this is a follow-up on the recent question we asked about post-crash projects.
We'd be open to a variety of applications on different topics. that deal with looking at saving lives and preventing more serious injuries from that post-crash time onwards. So that could be analysis, a piece of analysis about what happens in that period. It could be ways to look at best supporting emergency staff. They're two ones that I immediately think of. And in fact, one of our most successful projects was a large project called Exit, which looked at the extrication process following a collision, and that actually won the Prince Michael International Award last year. So that's a good example that I recommend you look at. We also funded a piece of analysis at Coventry University looking at different ways that staff could be supported in the triage phase following a collision. So they're two examples that come to mind.
Excellent. I'm just cautious about the time now. We are getting towards the end of the session, so I'm going to take the questions that are currently in the Q&A, but probably won't take any more new ones. And so we've got about five or six to go, and then we'll wrap up the webinar. So the next question reads: if a borough council had a project for which they needed county council sign off, and the county had already been involved in a previously successful project in a different borough, would the borough council be able to bid? Quite specific.
Yes, they would, because organisations can have more than one application in and can receive more than one grant and be involved in more than one project. So that would be fine.
Excellent. And just a question here about the meetings. The one-to-one meetings don't seem to contain a link to the meeting. Will links be sent out nearer to the time?
Yes, yes. There should be one link that'll be sent out closer to the time for your meeting. Yeah.
The next question reads: what is the total amount of funding available for these calls? Brackets small and large grants.
So for this round, there's quite a generous budget. It's probably around $1 million in total, possibly a little bit more. So, you know, we are hopeful of being able to fund, you know, a large number, a nice range of both small and large projects. So it's a good year to apply.
Yes, certainly is. Okay, 3 more questions to go. If PhD costs are difficult to include, how about postdoctoral early career academics who are directly involved in the project?
Yeah, we're quite happy to fund early career academics. We like to support early career researchers.
Excellent. Can an organisation match fund with external government funding?
Yes, that would be fine, because that's another source of funding. Doesn't have to be from the applicant. I'd say what we're looking for is not to fund 100% of the project costs. So we don't mind where the rest of the funding comes from. You know, government source is a good one, so that would be fine.
And can I add, if you have other sources of funding listed, in particular, generally for partnerships, it's good for you to be able to show some commitment or support from those partners, but particularly if you're saying a different organization is also funding the project, it would be great if you could include some evidence of that support or commitment.
Fantastic. Okay, a couple more questions then. One says, it says there are no times or dates in October to book a one-to-one. Will you be releasing these? Is that similar to some of the questions we've had before?
Yeah, the dates are on the website, and there are buttons to go into the link to book them. There are a couple of slots left on the 5th of October and the 10th of October, I believe. And we are thinking about releasing other dates, but that depends on our capacity.
Potentially, it'll just be one additional date in the second week of October. So,
Okay, excellent. And the final question, does the total cost have to include VAT in the total money application?
So our grants don't include that as well. So you need to apply for what you really need. Most often VAT isn't chargeable. Sometimes it is. It's best to take advice on that particular one from your finance team about what you're applying for.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to slightly backtrack on myself because one more question has come in and I'm going to take it. But I think then we will call the session to a close. The question reads, from working with council on active travel projects, they have often mentioned how there is very little funding from the government's sources to monitor the road safety impact. Could funding for the road safety monitoring be funded by yourself for cycle schemes?
Yes, that's a nice example of what we might fund under either the small or large strands of this round. So yes, that's something that we could look at, particularly focused on the road safety side. I mean, although active travel is obviously a sort of a sister cause, we're interested in the road safety aspects of that if an application comes in around that theme.
Excellent. Well, we managed to get through more than 40 questions there, so that was quite good going, I would say. I don't know, before I wrap up, whether anybody else has anything they'd like to add from the trust? Or
just really pleased with the interest today and the number of people attending, and some really great questions from everybody. So thanks for joining us, and we look forward to receiving some really great applications in this round.
Yes, excellent. Yes, and to reiterate what Louise said, thank you very much for joining us for this webinar, and I want to thank also the trust team for their presentation and for their insightful answers, helping you with your hopeful applications coming up. As we mentioned, the webinar will be recorded and will hopefully be available very soon. And all that's left for me to say is goodbye and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.